Hello and good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to start this talk with a question. If I could have a show of hands, which one of you would jump a homemade canopy made in someone's bedroom?
That's pretty good.
That is about 3/4 of you. Thank you.
Yeah, hopefully it doesn't go down at the end. We're hoping, yeah.
So this talk is called What It Takes to Make and Jump a Homemade Canopy. My name is Phil Wayper. This is a little bit of information about me. I started jumping at Brid in 2011. I still jump there now. I've done a few hundred skydives, a handful of base jumps, and perhaps what you're most interested in is the fact that I did almost half my skydives on canopies I made myself.
And my name's Eric Bowie. My home drop zone is Brid. I've done a few seasons packing at Hib. I've got over 800 skydives, over 500 base jumps, 60 plus have been made on a canopy made by this guy. And that's what I'm here to talk to you guys about. So yeah, cool.
So Eric will be speaking a bit more about something later. So perhaps the first question that people ask me is, how on earth did I get into this? Well, I think it comes down to the kind of person I am. I have to know how everything works. You know, my mind just works that way. If someone shows me something interesting, I have to take it to pieces and find out how it works. I've always had hobbies which are both allow for some creativity and requires logical, mathematical thinking. And as long as I can remember, I've had an interest in aviation. And perhaps the last one a lot of you share being skydivers. You know, I love a bit of an adventure. So perhaps it's natural that I fell into doing something just like this. It's going to be tricky to compress 15 years of my life down into 15 minutes, but there's a bit of a timeline of how I got into this. I started when I was still at school, when I was still in sixth form, and making full-sized but non-jumpable canopies, more like big kites, play kites. And from there, I progressed and tried to make improvements with every one I made. As I was doing that, I learned ground handling skills and eventually went on to be towed behind a truck, which is a picture of later, and flying off cliffs and such. And after a number of years, I made something that I jumped. So, yes, that picture of me on the left, that is me at school with my first prototype in 2011. That's original. And on the right is one I made later in the year. You see it's slightly bigger, slightly different, and it's orange. And I did manage to convince someone to tow me behind a truck at the airfield there.
That's a great picture.
These canopies are all about in the sort of 200 square foot range, in case you're interested. So none of the ones that you've seen so far I did jump. The canopy on the right, that picture was taken just by chance by a passerby as I was launching that canopy for the first time. And this is how I built up my experience. I didn't jump into it quickly. This is actually a canopy I made a bit later on, but you can see the kind of thing that I was doing with it, taking it to cliffs, to sand dunes, and flying them around, and I didn't have to jump them out of a plane just yet. So, perhaps the next question people ask me is, what do you need to know to make a canopy? Well, it's easy. It's just everything on there. And that's not an exhaustive list, and there's nothing on there that's made up. Those are all things that I thought of when I was preparing this talk. And it's a broad range. It's a broad range of things you need to know. And there's a lot of crossover between that and parachute rigging, which I'll come on to later. So I'm just going to go over quickly how a parachute, a modern canopy is put together. All canopies start with a design, whether it's on a computer or whether it's in your head or whether it's on the back of an envelope. And at some point, that gets turned into shapes, which are then cut out. Those white things that you can see, they're actually cardboard patterns on my bedroom floor. That's how I do it. In a big factory, it'd all be done on a laser table. Doesn't matter, the end result is the same. You end up with some folded up parts. That's what those orange things are. Once you have your parts, you can apply all the reinforcing tapes and structural reinforcement. And by the time you've done that, you're actually halfway through in terms of the time you've put in. Finally, you sew everything together in an order. That is the center cell of a canopy, exploded as it were, ready to be sewn together. By the end of 2014, I felt that I had learned enough and had enough experience sewing and flying homemade canopies to actually make one that I would jump. And it was just a case of putting together everything I'd learned. There wasn't anything, there was no particular moment where I thought, I know everything now. I did still have some questions that others were asking of me and I was asking of myself. The first one was, how would I know it would be airworthy? How was I going to test it? And who was going to test it? Well, in the end, I decided to go out to the USA. As for how I knew the canopy would be airworthy, I'd had it inspected by riggers, other manufacturers. They said, looks like a canopy, but really the only way to tell is to jump it. When I got to the drop zone in the USA, they were very happy. They thought it was an exciting project. I did find someone who was willing to try it out for me. Because at this point, I had less than 100 jumps. I didn't feel as though I could identify all the problems that I might have. I thought it wasn't the safest way to go about it. But I did manage to find a willing volunteer in the end. I didn't use a tertiary system because the canopy was large. It was 210 square feet. And I wasn't trying anything new. There was a good chance it was going to work. So this is a video of the first jump.
There's a little bit of colourful language at the end of this one, so you cover your ears if you...
So it did actually open, and it opened well. It decided to do a hop and pop from full altitude. And of course, word got round, and the entire drop zone came out to watch it land.
Fucking beer on! Fucking beer!
And that's me coming out to give him a high five. So I was very pleased with myself. This is, for the first time, I had a genuine achievement, and no one could argue. Sorry about this. Is it space?
Arrow key, yeah, there you
Thanks.
go. Yeah.
So I did end up jumping in the canopy out in the USA after I'd been convinced it was perfectly fine. Unfortunately, there's no videos of that, but there is a video of me awkwardly being photographed picking up the canopy afterwards. But I did do a number of jumps up on that canopy afterwards. When I got back to the UK, I thought that things would be easy now. I'd proven that the canopy would work. I wouldn't have to prove that it worked in theory. Unfortunately, it wasn't quite as plain sailing as I hoped it would be. It was asked that I become a parachute rigger, and in 2018 I did achieve that, and it's been a lot easier to convince drop zone owners to allow me to jump my canopies since then. As soon as I'd completed my first canopy, of course, the next question was, what can I make now? And I had a number of other ideas, and I built loads of those ideas and test jumped them. With every one I made, I tried to improve the process somewhat, improve the accuracy, improve the speed, improve the quality of the finished product. And what might have taken me 6 weeks in 2014 was now down to a 4-week process in terms of actually making the canopy. And it was around this time that I started to think about what my end goal was. Was I just going to continue being a hobbyist? Was I going to make something that people would buy? And I decided I was making big rectangular canopies, and maybe my goal was a bit more niche. So I started thinking about whether I wanted to make base canopies or bailout canopies for pilots or something else entirely. And I started to do all my jumping myself, all the test jumping myself, and I decided I wasn't going to make anything that I wouldn't jump myself. I had requests for people asking me to make 99 square foot canopies. So this is the canopy I jump at the moment. It's actually one of the better openings. Next one. Sorry about this. And this is a video of Eric jumping in. And perhaps at this point, you're thinking, if I hadn't told you, you wouldn't know this is a homemade canopy. By 2018, I'd made a number of other canopies. This white one on the left, I actually went out to the Czech Republic to jump. Unfortunately, it didn't really open very well or fly very well, so I was a bit dejected. But I made some improvements to the patterns, small improvements to the patterns and the line set, and with very small changes, I made this canopy on this right, the green one. And I'm happy to say that flies beautifully. You wouldn't even think they share a single centimetre of pattern, but they're virtually identical. They're both 210 square feet, by the way. The orange canopy on the left is virtually identical to the green one you've seen before, but made from lightweight materials. And I built that almost as an exercise to see what it would be like to make canopies from lightweight materials, see what differences there were, whether the finished product is different, whether it's different to construct. The canopy on the right, the orange and blue one, that's a base canopy. And I think this would be a very good time to hand over to Eric, who's going to tell you all about it.
Do you want to just do the slides?
Yeah,
Might as well.
yeah.
Cheers. So I'll begin my part of the talk by telling you how I came to meet this strange and interesting young man next to me. I'd just completed AFF, done a handful of skydives, and I was bumbling around drop zones, sort of trying to find out which one I liked. And I walked through the door at Brid, and one of the first people I met was Phil. We were just sort of watching one of the videos that you get at drop zones of free flying and canopy flying, and he turned to me and said, I've built a homemade canopy, which, I mean, it doesn't take somebody with a lot of experience in the sport to realise that this doesn't go on every day. And I instantly was interested, and you know, we've developed a great friendship over the years. We also live in the same town, which helps as well. So whenever I want to brew or just to talk about things, I can nip round and put a canopy up on his hanger and talk parachutes like we all like to do. So yeah. So we both went our separate ways in the sport. Phil progressed down the line of making parachutes, and he did, went into the tunnel doing a lot of backflying and honing his skills that way. I had different plans. I wanted to become a base jumper, and I'm sure there's a few base jumpers in the room who, like me, they started the sport and were like, I'm only skydiving to do base. That was me. I'm a bit different now, but back then that was who I was. I approached Phil asking him to make me a base canopy, and it was met with initial refusal at first, and he had his reasons. He didn't want to be responsible for the death of his friend, which I'm sure you can all understand. It wasn't until Phil had reduced his workload, streamlined his processes like he was talking about earlier, and I myself had matured as a competent and safe-ish base jumper. Next slide. So there's a little bit of technical spec on the board. We'll go into it, but not into great detail. in order for me to jump this canopy in a single parachute system, it had to be exactly what I wanted, and Phil didn't skimp on it. So the specs were it needed to be 260 square foot with a low wing loading. We don't want swoopy canopies in base. We want something docile that gives us time to react and time to think. It needed to be made out of a low porosity material, which we often call F111 in the sport, although the technical term is PN1. And this just gives it more predictable opening characteristics. The canopy needed to be 7 cells. Base canopies aren't 9-cell canopies like your Sabre 2s. They're all pretty much 7 cells. There's been like 5-cell base canopies that are made, but they're like your reserves. And that is for heading performance. There needs to be a low aspect ratio. And again, just like your reserve, we're after something that's docile. We're not after something that's swoopy or that we can wang about in the sky. And that also encourages the canopy to sink, which helps with accuracy. It needed to have a minimum of 3 vents. And again, vents, if you don't know, there are holes in the bottom skin, which, just like an accuracy canopy, they help with inflation. The canopy opens faster. And it also encourages the canopy to sink into landing areas. I needed to have a tail pocket for lines. We don't have D-bags on base gear, and this is just sort of it's for redundancy purposes. We're trying to eliminate things during the opening sequences that can mess us up and prevent bag locks or help prevent issues. They needed to have heavy Dacron lines, and that is because Dacron is sort of known for being quite elastic, and I'm primarily a slider down jumper, and slider down openings are very hard. So that's it just adds a bit of shock absorbance to the system. Needs to have coloured inner C and inner D lines so that I can identify which lines to put the tailgate round. I'm not a wizard, and I make mistakes just like anybody else. So if I can make it easier for me to put the tailgate around the right lines, then good for me. And that's also standard of any base canopy on the market. The canopy had to be bomb-proof. We wanted it to be built like a brick shithouse, basically. It needed to be super strong. Again, base openings are hard, and not only that, there's 2 kinds of base jumpers. There's those that have landed in trees, and then there's those that will land in trees. And I'm the first one. You'll notice that if you're a base jumper or you sort of study canopies, that nothing on this board here is different or radical. It's nothing experimental, and that's for a very good reason. We wanted to make something that was legit, and I think we succeeded. So yeah. So just to prove that this was made in Phil's bedroom, it's hung up on a canopy hanger, which, I mean, if most people had something with ropes and pulleys in their bedroom, we'd be asking strange questions, but Phil's got a canopy hanger in his, and here's him sewing it on his machine that's in his living room. So yeah, here's the canopy that's inflated, and those with a keen eye might notice that it's quite a thin canopy. A lot of base canopies have got deep cells. This one didn't, and it did affect the performance later on, which we'll talk about. And here's me and Phil. It was made during lockdown, so we're keeping some nice social distance here by holding the canopy. So yeah, you want to hit play on this? So we first tested the canopy, or Phil tested it by taking it for a skydive, and a lovely slow open, which is exactly what you want from a base canopy. But no, and if you notice, we had a little bit of end cell closure. The openings, Phil managed to sort of get them to open a bit faster by making a bit of adjustments to the brake settings. And like I say, it was going to be a slider down canopy anyway, so I wasn't too worried about that. It's all right, we'll get through it. And as you can see, it flies like a parachute, and it lands fantastically. So at this point, we were confident that it was going to work in some sort of fashion. It's all right. So Phil gave me the privilege of naming the canopy, and I chose to name it Aya. And as you can see, it's a nice symmetrical name. And in base jumping, we like to talk about symmetry all the time. Symmetry on the exit point, and I think that it reflects it quite well. And it also is a Japanese name for, it means beautiful silk in Japanese. So I think we kind of nailed that one there, yeah. So for the first jumps on Aya, I chose Verrières Viaduct in the south of France. I like France, I like pastry, as you could probably tell. But it's a fantastic bridge. It's 475 foot high, and it's got a huge wide open landing area. For the deployment method, I chose to go handheld. We have 3 major deployment methods in base. And I'll just wait a second. And yeah, the first one we talk about is a PCA or a static line, where somebody opens the canopy for you, and we typically use them on really low base jumps. Handheld, which is a free fall jump where we throw the pilot chute and that extracts the canopy, and stowed, which is just like a skydive rig where it's in the bottom of the container. I wanted it to be a real base jump, the first jump, and people often ask me, why did you not do a static line? And it was, you know, in here, I still am that base jumper, and I wanted to send it really and do a proper jump. So that's why I chose that and being honest about it. So the mission objectives, we've got an extensive list here. It's pretty big. Survive. And I know it kind of sort of sets the bar quite low, does that, but really, although we sort of had an inkling, or a fairly good inkling, that the canopy was going to work well, we didn't really know how it was going to perform, and we weren't out there for that reason. It was just to purely succeed in making it and jumping it and getting back home. However, the canopy did, in some areas, exceed those expectations. So the first jump, this is me going handheld. And looks like now,
260, test jump 1, handheld, 2-second delay.
Yeah, base second. So it's 2 seconds, it's like 1.5. Yeah, you know it. Here we go. See you later. So we had a little bit of a left on that one, but that wasn't a problem because we're jumping at Verrières, we're jumping at a nice, safe-ish base location. We could have had a 180 on that and there'd have been no problems. We would have just flown under the bridge and landed in the field behind, or in the trees, yeah. And so for jump 2, we knew it would work at this point, so I thought I would switch it up a little bit. Let's not play in ball. There we go. A nice safety gainer with bang-on heading openings, so I mean gainers for safety. And as you can see, it flies fantastically. This was a nil-wind day, trees Siam. So I thought I'd give it a little bit of front riser. And yeah, I was impressed. Great land.
Bit of gainer.
Yeah.
Beautiful, yeah.
So yeah, it works. So let's talk about the positives. So we had rapid solid openings. The canopy opened just like a base canopy. There was nothing strange that it did on opening. It didn't wobble. It didn't sort of do anything untowards. And I was very happy with it. When properly packed into the correct size container, we had on-heading openings. On that trip, I kept getting lefts. I'm like, why am I getting lefts? Why am I getting lefts? Well, as you can see here, everything matches. I've got blue and orange rig, a blue hoodie, orange trousers, and the canopy was blue and orange. The container was perhaps a size too small, and the canopy itself didn't have packing tabs. So when I was packing it, when I was closing the container, I was kind of pulling it over a little bit, and it was just inducing that left-hand turn in it. But once packed into the correct size container, we've had no heading issues whatsoever. She's been fantastic. And yeah, she's got great range and an excellent flare, and it is, for a base canopy, a real pleasure to fly. So this is a video of me jumping in the Lake District with a guy called Rich. And as you can see, it keeps up with base canopies. This is a scroll canopy, and there's nothing strange about what it does. I thought about doing a little bit of crew on this jump, but checked it out. As often base jumpers do, talk about doing something, and then when it comes to it, goes on for a bit, so I'll just let you watch this. So yeah, Aya wasn't perfect. There were some issues. I mean, we did expect a few, but they were easily resolved, really, most of them. So she was a little too fast, and like I said earlier, we want base canopies to be slow and docile. It's actually the first canopy that Phil's made, in my opinion, that was on the other side of the performance rather than sort of underperforming. And so it came as a surprise, but we tried to slow the canopy down by changing the angle of incidence, which if you guys have read your canopy handling manuals, you should know what that means. We changed the trim of the canopy, and it did help it a little bit. However, it didn't fix the issue completely. And for that reason alone, I wouldn't recommend jumping Aya in an urban environment or anywhere which requires you to be super accurate and land on a sixpence. We had a few end cell closure issues on the odd jump. And if you noticed on the skydiving clip, we had that issue. This was because Phil had cut regular size cross ports into the ribs of the canopy. And we sort of went on the philosophy that you can always take material away, but you can't put it back in. So we cut bigger cross ports in Aya, and the issue was all but resolved. You know, no end cell closure. So here's a video of both an off-heading opening and some end cell closure. And as you can see, yeah, this is why we jump at very airs. It's a nice, forgiving exit. Got a quick pump on the risers and positive push. So here's a video of going back to what Phil said earlier. He would never make a canopy that he wouldn't jump himself. So he had to put his money where his mouth was and learn to base jump. So here's it's a photo of me giving Phil a PCA on this container here, which he also made himself. So the design of the container isn't Phil's, it's by a chap called Al Gardner, but it was manufactured in Phil's living room, just like the canopy, the bridle and the pilot chute. And it is my belief, and if anyone in the room wants to correct me, that we are the only two people in the UK that are jumping an entire base system from pilot chute right down to the leg straps, which I think is pretty damn cool. You know. So I'll hand you back over to Phil now, and he's going to round this up.
Thanks. I'm just going to end with a video, which is a compilation of base jumps in this country. I'm showing this for two reasons. Firstly, is to show how far I've come from the beginning when I was playing with a parachute at school. And secondly, is because all of these jumps were made on Aya or a variation.
He's actually made an ultralight version of this canopy as well, which you'll see in these clips.
So I'll just play this video, which is a compilation of jumps, and then we'll open it up to questions.
Well, I was watching the ground coming up to me. I thought this canopy better open soon.
Glencoe in Scotland. Beachy Head. Langdale from the Lake District. Quarry in Scotland. And someone forgot his helmet on this one. Whoopsie. Yeah, well.
was watching the ground.
Sorry. So, thank you very much for coming along. I opened by asking who would jump a homemade canopy. It may interest you to know that all the manufacturers who's here today, Performance Designs, they started off in exactly a similar way to me. Has anyone changed their mind out of interest? Has anyone changed their mind the other way? They say they wouldn't jump a homemade canopy now. Good. I haven't made myself look like a madman. So, thank you very much for coming along. I hope you found it educational as well as informative. Has anybody got any questions?
Where did your original design come from?
Thanks. Yeah, so the original design, I'm assuming you mean for the first one I jumped or the first one I made?
Well, I assume none of them have been sort of original. They've all been a progression from the original.
Yes.
Where did the original come
Yeah,
from?
the original was kind of all the information that I could get off the internet on what canopies were supposed to look like. And they all have been an evolution from that first one in some way or another.
Yeah.
Because once you have something that works in some regard, you can then jump off that and try an idea, try an improvement. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, so he's not gone and got like a saber and deconstructed it, copied it. Yeah, no, it's his own, all his own
Sorry,
design.
yeah, they are 100% original designs.
Right.
So, anybody else? You're closest.
Thank you very much for the talk. I was wondering, do you use software for the design, and do you have anything to say about that for designing the canopy simulation on how it will perform and this sort of stuff?
Yes, thanks. Thanks. So in terms of the software I used, I just used a spreadsheet to do calculations that I could do on the back of an envelope, but the computer does it quickly. I don't use CAD. I don't use fluid simulation or anything like that.
You are learning though now, aren't you? You are.
Yeah, I'm trying. You want to talk to Gyro about that? They're the ones who really know what they're talking about with that. But I just use very simple software because I had simple, straightforward ideas.
Nice. Thank you.
There you go.
That's one.
Yeah. So you've got yourself a docile skydiving canopy and a slider down base canopy. Where are you going to go next with your canopy design?
Thanks. I don't know. It's the simple answer.
I can kind of answer this. So I have been gently encouraging Phil to. So remember we talked about the canopy being a little bit too high performance. So it's good. We can use it in some of the base environment, but most of the base canopies that are on the market today are sort of this like all-round, does everything kind of wonder material thing. And I've been sort of encouraging Phil to build me a canopy that's got a bit of deeper cell, and we can actually lower the performance and get it to come straight down. Whether he'll do it or not, watch this space. Yeah.
Is there any other questions? Oh, Georgie.
How many canopies have you built?
Oh, yeah, sorry. So in total, can't remember. How many am I on?
What, the jumpable that you've jumped?
Oh, yeah. So
It's
I think
5, isn't it?
I think I'm on about 14, including the very first one you saw, which I didn't jump. Including, if you're just talking about jumpable ones, I think it's about 10,
All right.
but some of them are copies or very, very similar. So about 10 that you could go and jump now.
There was another question.
Anybody? Yeah.
What support did British Skydiving offer you in your endeavours?
Okay, you can all
Be
go now.
diplomatic. Yes, sir. You got to be diplomatic here.
Thank you very much for coming along.
You looking forward with the rebrand for every.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
British skydiving's been changing a bit over the years. I did receive some support from a particular drop zone owner, and now would be a very nice time to actually say thank you to Noel Purcell for getting through my rigging rating. Without him, I wouldn't have been able to carry on with this. A drop zone owner did give me some jump tickets to run a test program on my Canopy. It's British skydiving.
You're looking forward to them changing the rebrand and support from the future, aren't you?
Yeah, I'd be very interested to see where they go in the future with supporting people with unusual projects like mine. Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone.